All right, I'll kick it off then. Hey everyone, Nick Wagner Sr. Welcome to another episode of the Full Potential Live Show. It is Sunday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Time, and I am just honored to be with another awesome guest this week. And we do this every Sunday night, so to give everyone the background, we'll record this live right now. So Eric and I have to be really careful because there's no editing here, right? This is live TV, folks. And so we're gonna have a discussion about Eric's career story tonight. It's going to get automatically put on LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook through the StreamYard platform, and then I'll take the audio and put it into the Full Potential podcast. For those of you that just want to listen to it on audio later on, you can stream it on all your favorite podcast platforms, including Apple and Google and Spotify, etc. And what we do is we bring on awesome guests that either I know personally or I get introduced to, and we talk about their career journey. And tonight is no different. So Eric Francis, welcome to the Full Potential Live Show, and I'm thrilled to have you tonight.
Thank you very much for having me, and it's been great because I've been watching people on here chat about their career journey. So it's to be on it. It's a full circle. So
I'm a little nervous because many of you might not know this, but Eric is a trained and skilled podcaster himself. So he is actually used to being in my shoes and being the one doing the interviewing. So a little bit of role reversal for Eric tonight, but I have to make sure I'm on my A game because he's done many of these episodes of podcasts. So no, but Eric, I'm really thrilled. I know you have a lot going on personally and professionally. So for you to make time to share your career journey, which I think people are going to find very interesting because you've done a lot in a very short amount of time since you graduated from school yourself. And I think as we were talking about before the show, you have some great stories of things that have gone well, and you have some things that as an entrepreneur that have not gone well, right? Which we're going to dive into. So I appreciate you being willing to share and your openness and your authenticity. I think that's what makes this show powerful. So why don't we start with this? I always start with the same question with every guest. If Eric Francis meets someone at a conference or at a business event, and they're like, "Who are you? Like, who is this Eric guy?" How do you respond to that? Like, how do you describe yourself?
So to be very blunt, is that it depends on where I'm at, and it depends on what I'm doing, right? And depends on what I'm talking about. But for this sake, my name's Eric Francis. I'm a lifelong Connecticut resident. I'm involved in a few different entrepreneurial ventures. And I'm also, part of the Techstars family as a senior engagement manager. And so for me, it's kind of interesting, and I play different roles in the ecosystem. I view myself as an active participant in the Connecticut ecosystem, startup ecosystem, and I just honestly I play different roles. So that's how I've introduced myself. It's funny. I haven't been to any networking events in a while now. So it's like I actually feel as if like I'm like rusty with that, and like it's going to be a new experience going back to them. Again, I'm a little rusty in this moment trying to tell you what I'm who I am and what I do, because again, it's a little variety.
Well, you're definitely not alone. You're definitely not alone in the feeling like you haven't been to a networking event, right? Because of COVID, many of us are, of course, not doing in-person events and going to in-person events, and we're doing things like this where we're doing it virtually. But I think you bring up a good point that kind of depends where you are and who you're with as far as how you answer that question, because you do a variety of things, right? And I think that's unique for you because you do so many different things, right? And you have your different experiences as both an entrepreneur, which you're still doing, plus working for Techstars and different things. And we'll jump into that. Mm-hmm. So you have a lot of, and I want to kind of go back in time here because you've been very entrepreneurial in your like as I mentioned, pretty relatively short career, doing a lot of different entrepreneurial activity. As you mentioned, you're part of the Connecticut ecosystem of startups and small business. Was this something that was like in your DNA as a kid? Were you the kid that was selling lemonade at like age 5 on outside your house because your parents were entrepreneurs and you knew you wanted to be a small business owner? Like, take me through that journey as a kid, and was that something that you learned early on?
Mm-hmm. So one, definitely don't necessarily come from a family of entrepreneurs. I would say that I come from a family of kind of get things done, right? Or in that kind of manner. My mom's actually a local politician. My father's an executive in the manufacturing space. And so no necessarily entrepreneurial blood. However, I would say that I have always felt the need and the want to kind of create things. I'm not an artist at any means. I can't draw. I can't sing very well. I mean, maybe my son thinks I can sing very well at this point. Can't do like those types of creative acts. But I've always wanted to invent things, and so forth. So always felt the need to kind of put things into the world, right? A quick kind of yes, I've done the lemonade stands. Yes, I've done the shoveling of the snow for people and the things. But I guess for me, I always look for opportunity. And a little quick story is that like when I was younger, I remember, I don't know if people remember, but like sometimes you'd get sent home from school or you'd get something in the mail where like you could like sell stuff and then win prizes. And some of it was like, or wrapping paper and stuff around the holidays, right? So I remember coming home from school one day. I obviously was left alone, or I could manage myself. So I'd probably say like late middle school. And I remember picking this up or seeing it in the mailbox, and then immediately going around my street and hustling the stuff because I saw some prizes in there that I wanted, right? And so and my mom comes home from work or whatever, and I'm like, Mom, like I got these checks already, like we're ready to rock. My mom's like, what the hell is this? Like you're not doing this, like it was just one of those things. And I had to go back and give back the checks, being like, he's not doing this, like kind of a thing, but so no, definitely entrepreneurial. I would say that I set myself on a path to do this, to be entrepreneurial. And I guess I'm that type of, maybe the student that didn't really fit in class maybe too easily. And it was interesting. I may, like, again, some people from my high school maybe think I wasn't the greatest student, but at the same time, I was still doing kind of entrepreneurial things and creating new programs as like a part of the the senior class and everything. So I'm definitely in my blood for sure.
No, it's interesting how you mentioned that people might not have like looked at you as a great student, right? But in your mind, and I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs kind of feel this way, that your experiences in school, everyone has different experiences in school, right? And whether it be high school or college, right? And some entrepreneurs don't even go to college, right? But I feel entrepreneurs kind of look at school very differently from people that don't start their own businesses. It's just kind of like in your nature, the way entrepreneurs think. So did you know when you were in high school that you wanted to be, you wanted to go on this path of being an entrepreneur? Because you went to college, you went to Central Connecticut State University for business management. Did you know in high school before you went to Central that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, and that was why you went to Central for a degree in business, or what was your thought there?
Yeah. So one, I applied to one college. I applied to that college when I was, a junior. I got in. So by I would say October of my senior year, I knew I was going to Central and all that kind of stuff. I knew how much it was going to cost. A lot of people don't I knew, kind of calculated, how much it was going to cost and so forth. I was, I had a rough high school. I wasn't, and so I was ready to be done with school, but also knew that you got to get a degree, right? You just got to do it. So it was like, okay, where can I go? How much money is it going to cost? I'll work through school and everything like that. And again, there was some money that was passed down from a great grandmother that allowed me to kind of okay, if I can go to that school and not have to worry, right? I can go to that school and be able to supplement. And so it was a conscious decision to, one, stay in Connecticut, by the way. It wasn't I don't want to go far away. And it was actually because I didn't I already started to build a little bit of a network when I was in high school. So it's I wanted to kind of double down on that. And for a bachelor's degree, just wanted to, figure out to go there. So business, looking back on it, I wish I didn't do business. I wish I did an engineering degree or did some other technical degree, because I think that right now it's one of those things where it's business plus. Okay, you have a business degree, but how are you gonna apply that, right? But yeah, when I kind of saw what I needed to do in terms of financially. A state school. Again, my grades weren't the greatest in high school. Definitely not, but they were manageable. So I made a conscious decision on where I wanted to go. And I will have to say is that I'm very happy with that, because again, my experience at Central has like I'm still seeing value of my education at Central, like to this day. And it's not,
Well,
yeah.
I just think it's interesting that as a high school student, you thought about your ROI of going to college and what it was actually going to cost. Like that alone kind of makes me chuckle, because that's a common thing that a lot of high school students don't do. And you see kids coming out of college with $200,000 in debt and a degree that they don't know what they're going to do for a job, right? So the fact that you were that aware as a high school student, I think is pretty awesome. And again, you mentioned you some money from a great grandparent, which is also obviously great too. So you're at Central. You're getting your business management degree. Were there any classes that you took there that kind of opened your eyes to, wow, this is going to be like a great learning experience to be an entrepreneur? Or was there an experience or some event that happened in school that kind of like maybe pushed you even further towards the entrepreneurial journey?
Um, so yeah, so I mean, when I went to school, like I saw it like a job, right? You're doing what you got to do to get through the classes. Honestly, I looked at college as a networking thing. And I kind of go back to the statement of like, I'm still getting value out of the stuff out of college. And it's because of the relationships that I fostered and built through, while I was there. I was there to do business. I wasn't there to party, right? I wasn't there to that. It's kind of funny. That was my high school career, right? I could do that. When I'm paying for school, I'm getting it done. And by the way, I will have to say is that like, I don't think everybody's in like every high school student at 18 is in the frame of mind to make that decision, that conscious decision about like the next 10 to 15 to 20 years of their lives. Like when I was 18 years old, I put myself on a path that I'm still, there's consequences still to this day. Right. But when I was at school, Central was more about kind of the different entrepreneurial experiences. I'm lucky, I guess. I graduated in 2010, started going to college in 2006. So I started seeing the wave of Facebook and everything, and kind of seeing like the rise of entrepreneurship as cool. And so a lot of schools were starting to invest in that stuff, right? Invest in those programs. And so I was lucky enough to have a professor, Drew Harris from CCSU. Took a couple of his classes. There were some pitch competitions that I came in first, second, or third in. There were a couple of business plan competitions. I won for. I would say that throughout my college career, probably won or placed in probably about a dozen maybe kind of programs, not all with the same idea, some of them with similar ideas to what I've done after that, and so that kind of cemented it. And then what I guess my big thing that kind of and by the way, I was definitely also the type of student who did have to be woken up in a couple of classes that just bored me. Okay. So it's like, I'm not like, I'm the typical student where it's like, or I'm not the typical student where, I don't know. I'm not typical, and I fashion myself on that, I guess. But the classes that I really was into, I didn't have to be in the classroom for me to get the value out of that class, right? It was the stuff that I was doing outside of it, and the project-based learning and the different internships. I mean, I would say I created with a couple of their students, with Drew Harris as like a faculty advisor, a couple of my own internships, right? And we're able to kind of craft some of the old things that we wanted to do. So I guess my willingness to view my professors as colleagues when I was in college kind of was the kind of the big thing maybe that came up, and kind of I keep kind of going back to, because if I'm again being blunt, and I've talked to professors since then, the stuff that I learned in the class, I could I needed to put that into like actually do that in the real world for me to actually learn about it. So
yeah, I mean, I think you bring up an interesting point. Like the experiential learning is really what you enjoyed from a college perspective, right? So like you mentioned, the projects and the actual applying some of the things you learned in the classroom in the real world. And I love how you took advantage of your relationships with other students, your relationships with the faculty, the pitch competitions. I mean, that it sounds like it sounds like you really looked at college as, like you mentioned, a networking opportunity, and a place of business rather than a place for fun, which I think is a unique experience for a lot of students because to your point, at 18, a lot of people don't think that way. So that's fascinating. So you graduate from Central. Where does work take you, right? So what was your first job out of college? Like what was your what was that job?
Yeah, so it's kind of weird. So it's kind of like interesting is that my and this is another thing about college. I'm just kind of like tied into like the first job actually, but I went on a study abroad program down to Nicaragua. And I went with one of my business professors, Sarah Stuckey, and we were trying to like the global trade, and we were tracking tobacco leaves from Connecticut that would go down to Nicaragua to be rolled and so forth, and then shipped back up here. It's a whole cool thing. So went down there, had a great experience, kind of got the bug of social entrepreneurship, and then kind of like my eyes opened up to benefit corporations and the idea of using business for social good. And so that was like my last semester. So I was supposed to graduate in June of 2006, 2010. And then because I had like one extra class I had to do, I would technically graduate in December. So what actually ended up happening is that I got the bug of social entrepreneurship, went on this journey with Sarah Stuckey down in Nicaragua. And we actually resonated with the fact of one of the things that we were talking to people about down there. We're like, how can we help you? How can we actually come and help the people of Nicaragua? And it was unbelievable that the people were like, don't do anything for us. Go back to your own community and help your own community. Go back into where you're from and double down on what you can do for your, like, stop asking what you can do for us. Like we're cool. Like it was like this weird kind of like, just like you're down here. That's great. But like, go back. And so it's, Sarah and I like took that to heart, and we actually came back and we kind of did this co-collaborative project called Community Central, where the problem we saw at the universities was that a lot of professors had these great ideas about how they can impact their local community or do these different studies or so forth. And then also students, there's a lot of entrepreneurial students that were like, listen, I can help run that project or put it into the world, right? And then you almost use it as a portfolio kind of a thing. So we put this idea together. We raised about $30,000 from CCSU, and we started a Community Central. It was a downtown hub down in New Britain, and it did everything from tutoring to mentoring. We had an art gallery. We did a bunch of different kind of like pilot projects, right? And so that was actually like my first kind of like, so I view like June 2006 of like, from there on what I was doing. And so I was doing that. We raised a couple of grants, and it was actually funny. So I'm running this little, I'm not making a lot of money, but I'm running this little like center, like it's my first entrepreneurial experience. It's a little program within CCSU. It's going well. And we actually got into AmeriCorps Vista, got some other people to come on. And I remember my mom, I was like painting a wall or something and doing something at the space. My mom calls me and she goes, hey, Eric, how's it going? Yada, yada, yada. And she goes, so I think you should meet this guy. And I was like, okay, like, what's up? Like, like she goes, this guy, he's looking for a secretary. And I was like, oh, like, Mom. I was like, and I remember saying it. Like, I was like, Mom, I just graduated college with a bachelor's degree of business management. I'm not going to be a secretary. Like, I'm a business management, like, grad. All right. Like, all pumped up, like, come on, secretary. And so she's like, no, like, I think you should go do it. And like, my mom's good with this. Like, she'll be like, I think just go talk. Like, you'll figure it out. Like, whatever. So I ended up going to talk to this guy. It was this older guy. He was from Texas. His name was Gib Nance. He's rest in peace. He's since passed. But he, old Southern draw. And I go to his house, and he has some coffee, and so I'm like, okay. My mom said you need a secretary. Like, why is she asking me to like come here and talk to you about this? And he goes, let me talk. And this guy's like an old school salesman. He's been in the insurance industry, real estate, just a salesman, right? Like the old Southern draw. And he goes, let me tell you about this company that I'm working for right now. He's like, I'm working for a construction company, and we've been doing some sales, and they have this idea of, he starts telling me the whole thing about assisted living. and about how some people, and this was back in, again, 2010, 2011, where if like your loved one fell down and broke a hip or something and they went into a rehab facility, insurance like won't let them leave and go back home unless it's handicap accessible, unless it's unless there's a way for them to go home without like them going to be in more harm, right, and so forth. And so he's just talking about the numbers of how much it costs and like how it puts people into bankruptcy sometimes and yada yada yada. And so they say they had this new concept of doing modular home additions for handicapped and disabled individuals that can be very quick and easy. They're all ADA compliant, and it's a faster replacement and so forth. So I'm like, wow, this is legit. And he starts telling me about, we want to franchise it, and we want to do this, and we want to do that, and like selling me on it. And so I go, listen, basically this guy was older, and he goes, listen, he goes like, I need a right hand man. I need kind of like somebody that can come along with the sales, and I'm a little bit older, but like I need somebody that understands what's going, the new age of social media, and and this is 2010. It's 10 years ago, where like app development was still pretty nuanced, for some people. And so at that point, I said, listen, can you set up a meeting with the owners of the business? I'll come in and kind of pitch my services and see if I can do it. And I went in there and I pitched them to do marketing support for them for like 10 hours a week, I think 10 or 15 hours a week. And then I just started hanging around the office. From there on, I got paid 10 or 15, for 10 or 15 hours. And then I hung around the office for even longer and just talked to people and see what they're doing, interjected myself into conversations. Okay, you need some help going to a trade show, this or that. And so then basically got more and more involved, and that kind of led to multiple different roles there. And that actually kind of led to, interesting enough, is like helping to kind of build this business unit around modular home additions for handicapped and disabled individuals, but then also doing home improvement sales. So I was selling roofs and siding and decks and that kind of stuff. So it's like one of those things where you got to take the good with the bad, maybe. But it was that was like my first gig out of college that wasn't like waiting tables or something, right? So,
and it's interesting because your mom, your mom makes this introduction for you, right? And obviously you trust your mother, right? Because she's your mom, but at the same time you were kind of I can hear it in your voice. You're kind of like, what? Why does she want me to meet with it? But you did it, right? And then look where it took you. So it's interesting. I love that the whole network effect, right? Like your mom knows someone, introduces her to you, you to this individual, and then you worked there for almost 4 years, right? It was a good amount of time.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, like it was a run for sure. Like it became another 4 years of my life. And I will have to say though, again, it's you have to be a little bit self-aware to like make be able to grab a situation. I was like, listen, I need to further investigate this, right? Like he sparked my interest. There's definitely something here. And I've definitely been the type of person where I probably maybe say something that I maybe shouldn't, or kind of imply myself into a situation, be like, oh, so like, let's make something happen here. Like, let's see if I can go pitch myself. So, so it all works out. Honestly, it's kind of interesting is that myself and that guy who brought me in, Gibbs Nance, we ended up started butting heads because I started doing more and more and more. And then, we both ended up getting a piece of the company and kind of like part of the action. And it was one of those things where as things move and progress, like it's like you have to, it led to different things. And I will have to say, building a construction company, not being in the construction industry and not going for construction management at CCSU, right, which they have a great degree program on, I had to learn a lot on the fly. And that was interesting. But yeah, it was definitely a good run. I still talk to the guys once in a while. But yeah, Well, it's interesting because even though this wasn't this was a for-profit business, it still involved something which it seems like you were really excited about, which was helping people, right, and letting them live the life that they wanted to live. So, it wasn't technically a social entrepreneurial activity, but I'm going to guess you still felt pretty good about what you were doing. Oh, for sure. I mean, and this is the bringing families together and like, kind of helping solve a problem that is facing, a family in crisis is great. I will have to say, being 22, 23, 24, and go and selling, $100,000 projects to a family. I mean, I was selling to, 40 to 60-year-old children of parents of 80 or 90, and they have kids my age, and I'm telling them how to solve problems for their parents. So there was a lot of interesting dynamic, which I learned a lot from, right? And so that was it was great, great helping families out. Definitely found out some interesting thing about like how in-laws work sometimes, like no way, I don't care if they're paying for it, they're not coming to live it with us, kind of a thing. But that's, there was always some good moments out of that too.
No, and I mean, and again, it sounds like you learned a lot, which is you learn something in every role, whether you like it or not. How did you make the transition from, working for this company and focusing on, construction, right? Construction management to your current business, which is focused on food and farming, right? So how did you I want to hear the story, how you made this transition to what is your current business venture?
Yep. So it's kind of, I guess it's a twofold. One, I had a hobby. So there was a hobby that I picked up in college of hydroponic and aquaponic farming. And so I kind of picked that up and that kind of went hand in hand with like Community Central and talking about food and kind of urban food systems and everything. And actually, my first garden, so I come from like the country, I guess, in Durham, Connecticut. I moved to New Britain, and that was the first time I had my own garden, right? It was, in New Britain. So it's like I had to move to a city to start farming. So I had a hobby when I was at, Pals Built. I was seeing some kind of writing on the wall. Like I said, franchising a construction company, and doing some stuff like that. By the way, we brought the company through franchising. We actually sold a franchise. We went through the process and actually tried to do this whole thing, but it's like, which was a crazy learning experience as it was. But it was just too hard. And it just wasn't, where it was going isn't where I wanted it to be, or, and so forth. So I made the decision to leave, and kind of just, do out a couple of, more kind of projects. And so in that idea is that I actually made the decision to leave because I know it's the type of person I am. I was like, okay, I'm going to leave, and I'm going to go start my own thing. Like, it's my time. It's like, I'm going to go start my own thing. And so that's when I actually reached out. I knew the program managers over and the executive director over at Reset. So Reset, I was actually part of one of their founding boards when they were back in the Walker Group back in Farmington. And then when they moved to Pratt Street up in Hartford, they were doing their accelerator program. And so their impact accelerator. So I called them up. I called up the executive director and I was like, listen, I have a few ideas. I have a few different ideas that I'm looking at doing. Is there room in the accelerator? So she goes, yeah, pitch and see if you can get in. I actually pitched it. And I was able to get it, that I got in. And actually, I put in for two ideas because I was equally excited about both because actually both my hobbies. One of them was for an obstacle course gym. So I actually did a lot of Tough Mudders and like Spartan races. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna build an obstacle course gym that people can train for those events. Then the other one was an aquaponic farming business that would help people basically grow. Build aquaponic systems either for themselves or for their nonprofit. And so I went into the accelerator. On the first day, I was the last person to pitch, or the last company to pitch. And the first company to pitch was two guys named Spencer and Kieran. And they pitched their business that they just started called Fresh Farm Aquaponics. And it was an aquaponic farming business based out of Glastonbury that they decided that they wanted to build, backyard systems. So funny enough is that I approached them that same day and I said, listen, looking to do the exact same idea, very, very similar. I actually kind of heard about them. They heard about me because the industry at that point was very, very small. And so we kind of connected. I actually went through the entire accelerator with the obstacle course gym because I said, listen, you guys go with that. I'm going to go with this other idea, but I'm still going to help you in the background. And like, we'll still do stuff in the background, but like, I'm not like, might as well, right? Like whatever. And so went through the whole program. And by the end of the program, we actually both won first and second. Fresh Farm won first, obstacle course gym won second. And then we ended up just kind of signing a couple of early clients, and then kind of the rest was history. So,
and that was 5 years ago.
So yeah, it was about 5 years ago, 2015. Yeah. 2000, yeah,
And
2014, 15. Yeah.
can you explain to people what what is different about this type of farming versus traditional farming, right? Because I mean,
Yep.
this is like this like the
I
back of your hand,
know,
but
right?
for the
Yeah.
average individual who's never heard of this before, right? Like what is this type of farming and what's unique
Mhm.
about it?
Yep. So aquaponic farming is the combination of aquaculture and hydroponics. And the way you combine them is through filtration. So basically, we grow fish. We put their waste in the water through filters that then goes to hydroponic tanks that we grow plants with. So the simple version is that the fish provide the nutrients and the plants help clean the water. So that's what aquaponic farming is all about. It's a part of the greater ecosystem of food. It helps grow year round. There's some different inputs, and it's one thing that we've tried to do, try to be at the forefront of it, in terms of trying to understand what how much you can even grow, how much inputs go into a system, because I mean you're feeding your fish and you're getting produce out on the other end. But it's the combination of like fish farming and hydroponic farming.
And this is something the I guess my assumption would be that people think the benefit of this is you don't need acres of land, right? Like you can do this in buildings in cities.
Yes, for sure. Yep. Yeah, you can do it. You can do it. Anywhere that has light. Just depends on how the system's built. So.
That's so interesting. And so you're one of the so there's three of you that co-found
Yep.
Trifecta Systems, right? There's three of you, and that was 5 years ago. What was really like the goal of the business, right? Was the goal to help individuals at home? Was it to help businesses? Was it to sell directly to grocery stores? Like how did you guys, or did that evolve over time?
Oh, it definitely evolved over time. Interesting enough is that Trifecta Ecosystems, Fresh Farm and then Trifecta, we were one of the first benefit corporations in Connecticut. So we were
Oh,
part of the
very cool.
first group of, yeah, we were part of like the first cohort of people that literally were the first companies that got approved. So we wanted to be a benefit corporation. We wanted it to be around urban farming, and this idea of like a city that can feed itself. And so one of the big things that we wanted to do coming out of the Reset Accelerator was like, okay, we need to understand what commercial aquaponic farming is all about. Because 5 years ago, it was very hard to talk to commercial aquaponic farmers and get real data. Like how many ounces are you getting per spot? What are the inputs? What are your systems doing? Like all that. So, and it was very cagey, you couldn't really talk to some people. Some of the people that we did know, we were getting, good information from, but it just wasn't enough, right? Like we needed to see it for ourselves. So, the problem was that we needed to self-fund or bootstrap our way to building a commercial greenhouse and eventually building an indoor facility, right? So 2015, basically in that June, we actually, so what we started doing was that we saw that aquaponics was a good teaching tool, actually. So it was a good teaching tool for high school students to teach STEM. So quite frankly, in when I was in high school, I didn't like come out of high school remembering the ammonia cycle, right? And how ammonia turns into nitrite and nitrite turns into nitrate, and like why that's important and what that means and yada yada. So it's like that I was teaching myself that just to do my hobby, and so the three of us we realized that it was a good teaching tool. So my rambling right now is actually a symptom, and it is kind of a thing of like startups trying to do too much and trying to go down a few different paths. But the thing is that we, at the beginning of our, of the company, 2015, 16, 17, is that we noticed that aquaponics was a good teaching tool. So we started creating products for schools and saying, okay, we can integrate aquaponics, small systems, larger systems, as teaching tools for your curriculum. Okay. So then that allowed us, and we did that with both schools, but also nonprofits, and especially nonprofits that worked with intellectually and developmentally disabled individuals. And so as like workforce development and job skill training programs. So because like learning how to tend a garden is very similar, like the skills that you need to do that are very similar to a lot of other jobs. And so that's what we started doing, is that we started doing those types of projects to fund our putting up a commercial operation. And so we ended up doing that in 2017, 2018. We got an indoor facility in Meriden. We got an 8,400 square foot urban or indoor farm. And we actually built out a small commercial system. We built out a research facility. We built out a commercial kitchen, a microgreens facility. We had offices. And this is kind of where Trifecta has always been heading, is that we wanted to find out how many ounces we could grow per spot in an aquaponic system. And what that was going to lead us to was a business model around food and a direct to consumer food business, right? So then in 2019, in January, we got our commercial kitchen up and running. And this was after about a year and a half of running our commercial system in Meriden. And we knew exactly how many ounces we can grow per spot and very consistently of what types of greens. And so in 2019, we actually started our Weekly Harvest brand, which is a food subscription service centered around prepared salads. So that was like the evolution of our entire brand. Yep. And so we, we did a lot of stuff around schools, a lot of stuff around intellectually developmentally disabled individuals. We were lucky enough to know how to write some grants and kind of apply for some grants that went for businesses. But that was where we are always going to head to in terms of Trifecta, is trying to understand what we can do from a direct to consumer food service. But there was a couple of tangents along the way that also did end up bringing in money that we can actually bootstrap the company and so forth. So
no, it's really interesting. I mean, I don't know a lot of people that do urban farming, so that was one of the really interesting things I wanted to talk to you about, because it's just it's such a unique, I think it's a unique challenge, as you mentioned, that a lot of cities don't have the fresh food that people want, and this is an opportunity for that, to make that happen. So I think that's super cool. I want to just highlight a couple things that, again, a lot of you guys focus on doing a lot of good for the community here, right? And helping schools and helping people with developmental challenges or needs, right? Which I think is fantastic. And I know you mentioned that's something you're passionate about, which is the whole idea of giving back and the whole idea of social entrepreneurship. So I love how you've continued that. As I just want to ask the question, because there's three of you that own the company. How is it being one of three owners, right? Because I think a lot of people think about entrepreneurship and they're like, do I do it by myself? Do I get a partner? There's three of you. Like, any thoughts on anyone listening that they're thinking about starting a business on, is three too many, or should you stick with one or two?
So every scenario is different. The way a company starts is different. So obviously take everything that I'm going to say with a grain of salt. So one, my two, when I came into the business, another partner was leaving the business, so I actually replaced them. We as equal partners. But the interesting part was that my two business partners, they're like lifelong friends. And so they were lifelong friends. They grew up together. And so one, that's a dynamic that you have to deal with regardless. There's dynamic within that, and then there's dynamic between business partners. I want to say is that before we ever signed any legal agreements about myself coming on, we had hours and hours long talks of a lot of things, where we wanted to go, what and so forth. And guess what? Those hours and hours of talks didn't even scratch the surface of what we were going to have to deal with, and so still trying to, kind of talk through some of that stuff beforehand. We did do that. We kind of saw a longer term vision, and kind of where some stuff could happen. But I will have to say is that roles and responsibilities have shifted. The past 5 years, I was not always CEO. I've been the CEO for the past probably about year and a half. And so it is not, I've kind of taken multiple different roles within the business as well. As a startup, you have to anyways. A lot of different things has happened. We actually brought in another business partner shortly after or kind of another C-level person. brought him in right after, and then that actually ended up in kind of not ending up in a good way. And so not just not in a like good way, like it just took so much energy because they ended up leaving and it just wasn't a good fit, right? And so it's been, every scenario is different. We've been through it all. Like, when they say you're married to these people that you're business partners with, like it's legit. When I told them that I'm getting married, they're like, oh, so we're kind of getting married too. And I'm like, no, but I'm like really getting married. Like I'm engaged. Right. But then like when I told them that I was having a child, they're like, oh, so like we're kind of having a child right now. So, so it's one of those things where there's a dynamic. And I think with any startup, with any business, there's always that. But what it comes down to, can you have a hard discussion with somebody? Can you get better at those hard discussions? Like they're not going to be easy early on, but each time you have a hard discussion, is it easier to have that discussion? Are you, like that's the litmus test of like how things are going. Like, is it getting easier to deal with the tough things that surround business? And they have been. They always get better. They have been getting better. So with Kieran Spencer, I could say that going through everything, even the ups and downs of our business, we're always getting better at that. Having those conversations. So. Yeah, no,
I think that's well said. I think that's some good advice. I want to pivot because I know that so you currently have this entrepreneurial venture, but at the same time, you mentioned earlier in the discussion that you're really part of this ecosystem, right? And every city and every state and every country has like a startup ecosystem, and you're really doing two other things to kind of help that ecosystem here in Connecticut. So one, I want to talk about the podcast you have, the CT Startup Podcast, and then I want to talk about the other thing you're working on right now, which is Techstars. So why don't we start with the podcast, the CT Startup Podcast, because you've been doing that for many years as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned earlier you were a podcaster. You were a podcaster all the way back in 2015, so you were kind of ahead of the curve. Why start a podcast about startups? And was that really to kind of help yourself and meet other people, or what was the thought there?
So I'm gonna it's kind of funny is that I don't know, like when you look back on your life and you see like the feedback loops and you see how things connect and how it's like, oh wow, what I did 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago actually is coming to fruition now. It's kind of a thing. So I bring this up is because back in, 2012, 2013, I read a book called Startup Communities by Brad Feld. And so this book was basically, Brad Feld, some people don't know, but he's a venture capitalist. He's actually one of the co-founders of Techstars, just all around good guy. He's in Boulder, all about kind of just like how places become more entrepreneurial and innovative and so forth. So I read that book and it was all about how like startup communities, they bubble up from the people in it saying that I'm going to go do stuff, and not necessarily like almost like a Seth Godin-ish kind of being like, give yourself permission. Like you don't need to ask for permission to go do some of this kind of stuff. Right. And so that always resonated with me. That's actually why after college, I doubled down and said, I'm going to stay here in Connecticut. Well, when I saw many of people I knew going to Silicon Valley, Austin, Boston, all these places to go start their businesses, which some people called me stupid to stay in Connecticut. And I was like, I'm going to do this. Right. So part of that was doing, giving back, doing mentoring, going back to some of the accelerators. Like at Reset, I would go to their events. I would participate as a mentor and so forth, go to different things. And so it was actually funny is that during the accelerator for the Reset one, Impact Accelerator, I was commuting a decent amount, and I started really getting into podcasts. And I'm probably about 10, 15 years into podcasting at this point. And so listening to them, like I'm an avid listener. And so I started listening to one, Gimlet Media, with about startup, right? The Gimlet Media startup. I don't know if you've listened to that. So listen to that, was all into it. And then I had a free consultation with a lawyer, Dave Menard from North Carolina. and it was through Reset. And we started chatting about some stuff, and like, you know how like when you meet a service provider, like when you're an entrepreneur, and like you do some like chit chat in the beginning, like who are you, why should I trust you, and like all this kind of stuff. And we just started talking about podcasts, and I was like, oh, like I love this startup. He's like, me too, like the great one. And again, this is kind of one of those moments where I go back to Gibbs Nance and you know, kind of like me saying, oh, like introduce me, and like let's see where it goes. I said, well, like maybe we should start a podcast called CT Startup. Like it'll be about the CT startup like ecosystem, and like it will be all about this and that, and like we started talking about it. And what we noticed was that there's a lot of people in the Connecticut ecosystem that don't know about other things that are going on. And if they just knew and knew how they can contact that person, they're going to be motivated enough to go contact that person anyways and be like, oh, dude, I heard you're working on some cool stuff. Like, how can we collaborate, right? So we're like, well, this can actually be something, right? So we you know, spitballed it a little bit. Ended up buying, like somebody bought the domain name. I don't know who ended up buying it. And then Dave calls me up one day or emails me, and he goes, honestly, I went on a rant this weekend and just bought a bunch of equipment. And he just started buying like mics and buying this, and bought a like a switchboard, you know, switchboard for everything. Oh, like, I mean, we have boom mics, we have the whole thing. And so he was like, let's do this. And so then we started it. We started it with myself, Dave, one of his other lawyers, and then another entrepreneur, Mike Kaufman. And so we had a great time. We probably did a bunch of them, but then James, one of the other lawyers, he ended up getting another job, so he kind of quit. And Mike ended up moving to New York, so like he kind of dropped off. And then we were just doing it, and that's how it started. Like that's like literally just raising your hand, you know, kind of just like, dude, we should probably start this. And then he's getting into it, and we just do it, right? We're 140 episodes in. We've done everything from a bunch of different, you know, entrepreneurs to politicians to we've covered different pitch events where we've had like little segments worth of the people who went through the program. We're kind of in the phase where it's kind of funny. We actually set up kind of like one of our other co-hosts. We set up a studio right before COVID hit, and then COVID hit, and you know, it just threw everything off the rocker. But we're actually in the process of potentially bringing in some sponsorship and kind of like really doubling down, because at this point, CT Startup is something. We have 140 episodes. We have about 300 people listen per episode, but but the thing is they're either in Connecticut or Mountain View, California. So that says something. That's something very interesting. It is, and some of the people that are following and some of the connections. There's been investment made because of the podcast. There's been business dealt because of the podcast. There's been connection, and that's just all natural, right? So we're definitely looking to double down. We've had a little bit of an interesting year, but we had a few.
Eric, just to be fair, I think everyone's having an interesting year. So.
I know. So, but let me, yeah. And so the reason why I kind of bring that up is that, you know, Techstars, right? And so I kind of mentioned earlier before is that I just had a son in June, so I'm a new parent. And so thank you very much. I got married, just not this past August, the August before. And the thing is that we found out that we were pregnant, and on like straight up. When it comes to business, when it comes to entrepreneurship, I'm a very motivated person. I want the best, but like when I know I'm having a kid, like everything changes. I think that's for everybody, right? It just changes who you are, changes how you look at the world. And so at that point, I mean, my wife has been supportive through the whole thing. She's seen me when I was at Pal's Bill. She's seen what I've done there. She was with me when I left and started the own company, and you know, she really grinded through those years, right? Which is great. But she was like, listen, like, you know, you got to get something a little bit more consistent. You know, Trifecta is great. You guys have had some investment. You guys have had some good successes, but you need to look for something a little more consistent. And so, honestly, that's kind of when I just started looking out for other stuff, right, and just seeing like what was up. And there was something with Techstars that kind of popped up, and so it was very interesting.
I want to pause you for 1 second, Eric. Can you explain to my audience what is Techstars?
So Techstars, yeah. So Techstars is the global platform for investment and entrepreneur and innovation. And so we basically are a network of entrepreneurs and startups all across the world. So we actually run accelerators across the United States. We actually have one up in Hartford, the Stanley Black and Decker, plus Techstars Additive Manufacturing Accelerator. And so Techstars was actually doing a pilot project with Sacred Heart University. So I actually got, which is kind of, fits within what I like to do in terms of building product and trying to doing a lot of customer discovery and kind of trying to find product market fit, is that I'm on the product team at Techstars. And so we are looking to do, how can Techstars work with universities, and how can we help universities be more entrepreneurial, create more businesses, either whether it be, student run businesses or professor run businesses, right? And so it kind of matched up. I've also had a lot of experience with the higher ed Innovation Places program, and the Innovation Places program around the state. So this is kind of part of that. And so I ended up getting that gig in what was it, February? Wow, geez, February, and as a senior engagement manager. And basically what that means is that I'm with one of my colleagues, Tomasz Javor, we're running the project at Sacred Heart University, doing a lot of stuff on the ground. So we're running startup weekends, which are 54-hour hackathons, I guess you can say, trying to get people to start their business. We have a startup week that we're putting on at the end of December. We are doing a lot of experiential learning activities. I actually kind of talk about it in the sense of I'm literally getting to help Sacred Heart and the professors create things that I wish I had when I was in college.
Yeah.
That's literally what we're putting together. And so that's kind of, it literally is full circle to actually work for the company where one of the co-founders inspired me by writing a book about why you should double down on your ecosystem, why you should do stuff that does not pay you money, like running a podcast for 5 years. Right. And doing all that kind of stuff. So, it's just one of those kind of interesting things where you look back and you're like, wow, that dot connected to this dot, then connected to that dot, and then all of a sudden you have a picture, right? So,
yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, and you highlight throughout your journey how important networking has been for you, and talking to people that maybe you wouldn't have expected to talk to, or meeting someone you maybe didn't expect to talk to, and then just where the conversation led. And I think you just kind of being open to the discussion and then where it might take you, and just being naturally curious has really helped shape your career. So I think that's a fantastic story. And I love how you're giving back to the, as you know, I'm also from Connecticut, and I have a lot of guests on this show that are not from Connecticut, but I'm very proud to live here, and I definitely want to see the state do well. So it's awesome that you're giving back to the state and helping in such a positive way. So I want to pause here because awesome journey. I think a lot of great learnings that you've shared with my audience on things that have gone well and things that haven't gone well. I always end with the same question, which is, what is that one piece of advice that you would give my listeners that you think has helped you reach your full potential, or that one thing that's helped you be successful no matter what you've done? What would that one piece of wisdom be that you would share?
So to even think that I'm even close to my full potential is nauseating, because I don't want it. I am far from close to there. It's kind of interesting. At different points in my life, I think I would have different pieces of advice.
Yeah, absolutely.
At this moment, in a year ago, I would have different advice, and in a year from now, I'm going to have different advice. But for right now, I think you really do have to trust your gut in those moments where I've always had those moments in my life where I have felt some sort of pull to some sort of direction, and it was something where you just feel you feel something. You say, I'm going to go with that. I don't know why, I don't know, but I'm going to go in that direction. And so I would say just really learn to know when that's happening, and kind of just be able to trust that and be okay with that. And that's been kind of what's been happening with me this entire year. Because honestly, you know, being an entrepreneur, founder, a CEO, like of a company that you're going at, it was so hard to send out my first resume, you know, like for like legitimately. And here's the other thing. As like an entrepreneur, so that trust your gut. But here's the other thing. As an entrepreneur, like, and you're a founder, and your business might be struggling, and you know, you may have to make a move and so forth, and you may have to go get a job. Like, do not feel the guilt of like you're failing, because I 100% did. And I did not reach out to anybody in my network. Not one person did I reach out to be like, hey, do you maybe have a gig that I can do part-time, or do you maybe have something I can do? Because I felt like, oh man, they're going to be like, oh wow, you failed, dude. You failed. Like, you know, like you couldn't make it happen. I'm lucky enough to have landed in the Techstars. Like, literally, like, I think one sentence out of my Indeed kind of like resume resonated with the person who hired me. Like, that's the one thing, and it's worked out great. So I'm glad she actually read it. But like, that is another thing, is that, like, you know, I always speak about the network, just like, it's okay to reach out for your network. And if your network doesn't support you in that moment, like, they shouldn't be part of your network. You know what I'm saying? Like, they should, like, it's like, you just weeded them out. Right. Because after the fact, when I had a job and I started telling people about it, they're like, oh dude, why didn't you say something? Oh, I didn't know. Like, I would have helped. And I'm just like, oh, you know, like, it makes me even feel worse, you know?
Right.
No, so I think those are two pieces.
Great point. But look, I don't think what you're sharing is that unusual, right? Because again, I always talk about this. People are afraid to ask for help because they think it's a sign of weakness. And I think it's the exact opposite. I think it's a sign of strength. So I'm really glad you brought that up. It ended up working out for you, and you're in, I think, a perfect job for your skill sets and your experiences and your passions. But I think that's some great advice. So thank you. So I just want to, again, thank you so much. I know you have a ton going on personally and professionally. So for you to take an hour out of your day to meet with me and share your career journey means a lot. It was a great discussion. I think a lot of people learned a lot of things. So thank you for making time, and I wish you well.
All right, thank you very much, Nick, and happy to be on. I was pumped when you asked me, because you know, from you asked me to be on it, I'm on some sort of path that's making an impact. So I appreciate that.
You absolutely are. Thank you.
All right, cool. Well, thank you very much.
Well.